Good afternoon, everybody. We'll just wait for the rest of our panel to join, and here they come.
Good morning, Craig.
Oh, hello, Tim.
Good morning.
We're just waiting for Mr. Bender. Here he is. Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to episode 21 of our Association Leadership Series, officially the longest name of any of our leadership series webinars, part 2 of building maintenance, best practices, structural repairs, and 40 to 50-year recertifications. My name is Craig Vaughn. I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Castle Group, and I will be hosting this afternoon. And I have, I would like to welcome back Jeff Rembaum and Michael Bender. Michael, welcome back. We missed you last session. And of course, welcome back to our special guest panelist, Tim Marshall, of a professional engineer at AT Design. So welcome, guys. A couple of quick introductions. Michael, everybody knows you now, but we will give you a second to introduce yourself and the firm.
Just a second. I've already used it. Good afternoon, Craig. Good to see you, Jeff, Tim. Hello, everybody. Very quickly, law firm, as you know, is K. Bender Rembaum. We specialize in the representation of community associations. We represent over 1,400 associations throughout the state, well situated to take on more new business if you are in need of new counsel. Offices in Hillsborough County, Palm Beach County, Broward County, and Miami-Dade by appointment. 20 attorneys, 9 of us are board certified specialists in the field of condominium plan development law, including Jeff and myself. We regularly publish news publications by Robert Kay and Jeff Rembaum primarily. We host monthly radio shows with Robert and Sean Brown up in Hillsborough, and a weekly radio show with Peter. I am the legislative chair for the Florida Legislative Alliance of CAI. And Allison Hertz and Sean Brown are also very active with the Florida Bar's Condominium Committee. So we're very active in legislation as well. We offer a lot of free education, do a lot of webinars. I know, Craig, we're going to talk briefly before we end about a webinar that I'll be doing with Castle in a couple of weeks as well. And that's who we are. kbrlegal.com is where you can get more information.
Thanks, Michael. Jeff, did he miss anything?
He used all my time, but I will say if anybody wants the 2021 legal update, it is available at kbrlegal.com. It's right on the homepage. Click a button and you can download it to your computer. It is massive. It's 22 pages of new laws affecting community associations.
Like we needed more legislation. Well, guys, thank you. Tim, tell us a little bit about yourself and AT Designs.
Well, thank you for having me here. And my name's Tim Marshall. I'm the president of AT Designs. We've been in business since 1986. We specialize in structural restoration and buildings. We also do a lot of 558 and expert witness material work, and have a load of extent of fixing broken buildings. And that's why I'm here. So thank you very much.
Well, nice to have you, Tim. And you are going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting on today's webinar topic. So take your breath, slap on your seatbelt, and we'll go through that in a couple of minutes. So everyone, today I want to remind you that our panelists are here to give their opinion on what we're talking about, not necessarily specific advice for your association. So for that advice, you should reach out to your professional experts. As a reminder, as Marinez says, you're welcome to chat in your questions through the Q&A feature. I will try and work those into the discussion as we go through the webinar today. We are going to lightly use the polling feature in Zoom today just to really determine who is in our audience. So Ness, I will ask you to post the one and only question we will ask today. It's 3 parts. What type of community do you live in? Were you listening in on part 1 of the topic 2 weeks ago, just so we see where we stand? And what is the age of your building? Can you move the questions over?
We're missing condo in there.
Sorry?
We're missing condo in the type of community.
I specifically took condo out because I think one of the things I want to get off today is the recertification process doesn't just apply to condos. So it really applies to aged buildings. And that's really why I wanted to focus in on that topic, Michael, or that group of our audience today.
Cool.
Okay. So today's webinar, while you're answering that question, today's webinar is a follow-up to the session we had a couple of weeks ago. In response to the basically overwhelming number of questions. We had 90 questions chatted in. Clearly I did a poor job of working them into the discussion because I reviewed all of the questions that were submitted again today, and there are a lot of the same questions. So that's on me, and that's why we're having a follow-up today. Here's what we plan to cover. We plan to review the 40, 50-year recertification process. specifically who does it apply to and what is involved. We're going to talk again a little bit about building maintenance best practices, and then we're going to do some speculation on what the 2022 legislative agenda might look like, specifically as it relates to building maintenance. But Michael, you can give us an update in your unique role as the, I think, chair of the, I can never remember, it's too long a title for me, but I know you're well accredited in that area. So Nez, can you post the results? Let's see who's here. So, oh, that's really funny. I did forget condo buildings in the question. So that's my, that's what I meant. So we excluded everybody who was in a condo. So I do apologize to you for that. A lot of the buildings, can you just move down a bit so I can see the age of the buildings? 20, greater than 30 years old. So a large part of our audience, this is right in their wheelhouse right now with respect to what they're dealing with. And we have about 50-50 who listened in, and I added, I don't remember, more as a joke than anything else, because I don't remember what I had for breakfast, let alone what I did 2 weeks ago. So you're certainly excused in this group if you couldn't remember whether you listened in or not. Okay, so let's go on to our first topic, which is the 40 to 50 year recertification program. You know, who does it apply to? So the requirement to complete the recertification is not actually found in the statute. To remind you all, it is a requirement for certain structures in Dade and Broward counties. Palm Beach doesn't have any requirements right now, but Jeff, let me ask you, you're active in the Palm Beach market. Any talk about what they might be due or what might be in the works?
It's certainly being accelerated and focused on now. I reached out to the county attorney, who told me that she reached out to her successor, the deputy county attorney, and the county's chief land use attorney, who are both preparing something for the Board of County Commissioners consideration. As to when that will be, I'm not given any insight. But I think if
we took a straw poll, certainly among the four of us, I would imagine that we're going to see some action at some point, certainly in Palm Beach and maybe even statewide. And we're going to get Michael to talk to us a little bit about that later. Michael, do I have this right? Only Miami-Dade and Broward right now, correct?
Correct.
And do we ever see it written into specific documents, the requirement for engineering inspection reports or things like that?
I mean, Jeff, I don't know if I don't recall having seen that in any specific documents that I've looked at as of late.
No, so not in a declaration of condominium. I've never seen it.
Okay, so we're really just whether we're engaged by the county to do it, that's kind of the legal requirement. And we're going to talk about the practical, why you should do it as opposed to why you have to do it in a little bit. Jeff, so can you take us through who is specifically required to go through this process? Because I think there's some confusion that it does only apply to a high-rise condominiums.
And that's not true. So, you know, we go back and we look at Broward County, and its program was started around 2005, effective 2006. Miami-Dade County's recertification program was established somewhere in the mid-1970s. When you're looking for these, you'll find Miami-Dade's fairly easily in the Miami-Dade Code of Ordinances. However, Broward County's is not in the Code of Ordinances. Broward's program is in the Building Code Amendments and the Board of Rules and Appeals, and they adopted written policy guidelines and criterias. For you buffs out there, it is section 110.15 of the Building Code. So that's where you'll find all of this. Generally speaking, we're going to start with, it applies to every building except, and Broward and Miami-Dade are different. So let's start with Broward because it's closest to Palm Beach County. So it applies to every building except U.S. government buildings are fully exempt. State of Florida buildings, fully exempt. Buildings built on Indian reservations, school buildings under the jurisdiction of the Broward County School Board. Really calls into question why they would exempt those important buildings. But that issue aside, 1 and 2 family dwellings and minor structures defined as buildings or structures where they have a gross floor area of less than 3,500 square feet. So all of those are exempt from Broward. So your 1 and 2 story family dwellings are exempt in Broward. It doesn't mean, however, that the clubhouse at the HOA would necessarily be exempt depending on its size. When we go to Miami-Dade County, Miami-Dade is a little bit different. So it's all buildings except single family residences, duplexes, and minor structures. What's a minor structure? A building with an occupancy load of 10 or less and a gross area of 2,000 square feet or less. What do we surmise when we compare Miami-Dade and Broward is Miami-Dade really cares about their kids, because those school buildings, if they don't fit into the exception, have to be recertified, whereas Broward County took a lot of steps to exempt government buildings, state of Florida buildings, and Broward County School Board buildings. I think I want the school board's buildings inspected first. That's just me as a daddy.
Well, I think Broward has about $800 million to spend on their schools. So clearly there's some work to be done. Okay, well, Jeff, I think that's important. And what I want to emphasize, and Michael, I'm going to ask you, it does apply to potentially to amenities for our association, specifically in Broward and Miami-Dade. Dade was anything under 2,000 square feet is exempted. So anything over 2,000 square feet is subject to the recertification rules. Same, it's, I guess, 3,500 square feet in Palm Beach. Michael,
in Broward.
Sorry, Broward. Do I have that right?
That's what I heard.
So
Yeah.
I think, again, guys, I think it applies to a lot more than what a lot of people surmise. It's not just condo buildings. Jeff, there was a specific question that came in. What about a townhome community where the townhomes are linked in like clusters? So it is still a 1 and 2 story building.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
It's still a single family residence. So I think it certainly would be exempted under the Miami-Dade. It fits right squarely into the exemption. And certainly it's a 1 or 2 family dwelling as per Broward County. So that probably fits into the exemption as well. So I'd give it about a 95 to 99% chance that those types of communities are going to be exempt. Not the clubhouse, but the residences.
Good stuff. Okay, appreciate that. Now, Michael, let's go on to will the county tell us if we have to go through this process for our building or our amenities? Is this on us or is this on the county?
Oh, well, I'll put it this way. I think there is a requirement. The county is supposed to be informing communities that they have this certification requirement, whether it be a building, whether it be amenity. And by the way, I can tell you, I do have recollection on the last couple of years, a couple of our Broward County clients, HOA communities did have certification requirements for their larger clubhouses. But I will tell you this. If there's been a lot of lessons that we're learning, and unfortunately they're coming from out of a tragic situation out of Champlain. One of those is that the resources that the counties have are not sufficient to keep up with the counties, and whether they're deferring some of this to their municipalities, it doesn't appear that they're sufficient to keep up with the volume of buildings to which this would apply. So I think one absolute lesson that everybody should be taking from this is don't wait to get the letter, be more proactive. We have communities, boards and management teams who have know that, hey, we're 5 years out from our 40 year. We're probably going to need some work done, and they'll spend a few bucks, get a qualified engineer, and not to do the 40-year inspection report, but to do a report in anticipation of, and have an idea of what work they need to get done so they could start properly saving for it. Obviously, if any of that inspection pulled something up more critical, that would be able to be more addressed more timely. But be proactive. That's the lesson. Don't wait. Yes, the county's supposed to be telling you, but don't wait on it.
Michael, I think that's a great point. And I think for for people who are wondering whether they are required to do it, get with your attorney. There's so many different types of real estate structures and buildings, and I highly recommend, get with your attorney. They can guide you through this process. It's there's a lot of work to do on the engineering side, but it's a legal process you have to go through as an association. Marinez, I do have an example of the letter that you can expect to receive. Can you pull that up while I ask Tim? So this is an example of a letter that was received from the Broward County, I believe, for one of our associations. So this is what you can expect to receive. It did go to the registered agent of the association, not to the board of directors. So I think that's how they kind of triggered who it was sent to. So just for your information, be on the lookout for this type of letter as your 40-year certification process.
And Craig, and that's a great, thank you for putting that up. I also want to point out also, you notice it's from the city of Pembroke Pines. And it starts with the city's been notified by Broward County. So to my point, the county is delegating some of this authority to the cities, but don't count on that being timely from Broward County or from the city.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, good stuff. So Tim, I just want to ask you a quick question. We've got some inquiries as to what is the start date for the 40-year timeline? Is it CO of the building? Is it when I move in? Is it something else?
The date starts from the completion of construction, the issuance of the CO.
Okay, great. So
Which
that's
would then go on the tax records, which triggers this whole thing.
right. Okay. And then Tim, quickly, the recertification is referred to sometimes as a 40/50-year recertification program. Why both numbers?
Well, the minimum date is the 40-year is a critical, and then it's a 10-year program thereafter, to reiterate it. So if you do your 40-year on the 40-year of from the construction, another 10 year, every 10 years thereafter, you have to turn in an updated recertification.
And just so I know, if I do it at 35 years, do I do it at 45 years or do I have to do it at 50 years?
They give you 10 years, and if you did the 35 years, you would have 10 years. And I think that as a technical aspect, you probably could extend it to 50 years, because you were 5 years early, but they like the 10-year interval. That is a technical question that generally it's 10 years, but I think you can't go past the maximum 40, 50, and so on.
That makes sense. Okay, thank you for that. And what I want to get off of, guys, is there's a lot of questions of, do I have to do this? And I think, our comment is there are certain people that have to do it. If you have a qualifying structure in Miami-Dade or Broward, you have to go through this process. But I think one of the things we want to talk about today is, shouldn't the question be, should I go through a process like this recertification process? Is it healthy for my building to go through this process? And I think we would all agree the answer is yes. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go through. These are issues that you should be looking at in your community, regardless of whether you're required to or not. So lots of people required to go through this process. One, technically from a legal standpoint. Two, from a practical standpoint, it is the right thing to do to make sure your building is safe. So what I want to move on to now is the actual process and what is involved. And Tim, we're going to count on you here, but we view this process as a 7-step process. You engage an engineer. The engineer completes the inspection and a report. The report is submitted to the county or the city, as the case may be. The county advises what work needs to be completed for certification. In our case, we're an association. The association undertakes the work. The work is completed and then re-inspected by the engineer, and the engineer signs off on recertification. That's how we view this process. And we're going to go through a number of these steps. But I would say there are, we'd like to go through, there's a lot of questions to take you through the checklist. A lot of questions about, well, what are you going to look at? So we're going to use the 40-year, the Broward County recertification program as an example. Now you can find this at www.castlegroup.com. If you click on the green button at the top of the page to view our thought leadership series, you can find the checklist on the right-hand side of the page under helpful links. Why am I giving you such specific examples? Because I spent half an hour on Broward County's website this morning trying to find the process. So want to make this simple for you, www.castlegroup.com, hit the green button, go to helpful links, and it's about half the page down. So that's that. That's where to find it. And that's what Tim's going to talk through this morning. But so Tim, just so I understand, to confirm, the recertification program is largely a life safety driven system process that has two major components, structural and electrical, correct?
Yes.
And we talked about it the other day. Both are equally important, but there are very specific items to review under each area. And I think for those boards that don't have to do this, it's a great scorecard anyway. It's a great checklist of things you should be looking at in your community, even if you don't have to go through the formal recertification process. So Marinez, I'm going to ask you to show the first slide. It is the structural side of the checklist, if you will, the scorecard, if you will. And Tim, there's a ton of things on here. I don't want you to go through each one because you could probably spend the day. So can you pick 3 or 4 that you're asked about the most and kind of take us through, what is involved?
Craig, if you would, I think it's important at this point to kind of talk about the differences of the municipality as a governmental agency and then the association as the user himself, and how they act together, but they act separately also. So absolutely. These programs are established by Dade County, Broward, and soon to be Palm Beach, and most likely the state, as we said. Dade County and Broward County use them as a report card for the structural condition and the electrical condition of the particular units, the integrity and things of that nature. That way they're informed by a qualified professional where the building stands as to deterioration or unsafe conditions or whatever. From the association's point of view, it is more a report card on the condition of the building and how we need to fix it. The problem or the issue really is the 40-year certification program does not quantify or tell you how to fix it. It just identifies the program or the issues. And then the association will say, okay, well, we have a lot of issues. Where do we go from here? Well, there's not quite enough information in the recertification format that they have to the municipalities. And quite frankly, the municipalities don't want to have that kind of definition. It would be too much. So the associations need to then do additional work to quantify damage, which they can get bids to then fix and then move forward. So that really is the two major part separation. The municipality wants to make sure that they have an overview. They, in general sense, they can evaluate your building and know what the status is, which has been signed off by a professional. The association also wants to know what it is, but also needs to know what the cost is and how to fix the issues that are identified. So I thought that was important to kind of separate the two.
I think so too. Very important.
So getting this, the form here, this is a Broward County form. And, you know, in a basic outline feature, and then I know it's very small, it starts off masonry walls, general description of the construction, types of defects or conditions, cracks, spalling, rebar conditions, the floor and roof systems. So it essentially is a description of the structural element and then the conditions that are identified in for what particular element they're going to be identified on. So this goes through in a mostly concrete and block. We also have steel framing systems, i.e. The steel framing systems that hold up your air handlers and all that up on your roof, elevator equipment, things of that nature. And then we go down and they have concrete framing systems and windows. And there's a common misperception. The exterior facade of your building, after all the issues that occurred after Andrew, it has come to the forefront that the exterior facade is a structural element in itself. If you maintain the facade of a building in a hurricane, you don't incur damage. If the exterior facade fails, windows fail, wall systems fail, you have deterioration and you could have greater structural failure than that. So yes, the windows and the exterior facade are part of this evaluation. And then they go to wood framing, and that would probably be for your smaller structures, condominiums. And then also the last one, number 7, is the exterior finishes on the building.
So Tim, what type of testing are you doing? It's not just a visual inspection, correct?
It is not just a visual inspection. On this particular safety, it is a visual and potentially echo sounding, tapping with a hammer, dragging a chain, doing that to determine. The next phase from there may be more physical, core sampling, GPR to see the extent of it, ground penetrating radar or microwave, X-ray. One of the issues we do have, a lot of the higher, new, more modern buildings and high-rise have post-tension cables, which are sheathed in a plastic sheath in the slab, protected, but the end caps, which is the main element of the structure of the PT cable, could be exposed to the exterior elements and then prematurely deteriorate. So there are a lot of ways to test these things, but for the 40-year recertification, it is generally a visual or tap sounding overview of the structure to identify the existing conditions.
And then what about from a unit? Are you in units?
Well, yeah, of course you're in units to go to balconies. Now, if we, and we've talked about this before, if you had a 100-unit building and you wanted to do a detailed building safety inspection, it would be great if you could go to every balcony, but I think it's reasonable to take a percentage of the randomly selected balconies and you take them at different lower levels, corner units, upper levels, and things of that nature to get the feel for that. And that would be accessed through the individual units. Of course, if, for additional costs, it could all be done from the outside, but you'd have to hang a swing stage and it makes it a little more complicated.
Okay, and then, go ahead,
also
sorry.
the same thing for the exterior facade. There's really no way to look at a 10-story building from the ground with just visual. You can get on a balcony and look to either side, or you can hang a swing stage and you can actually go down a drop if you're concerned to get a better feel for where the structural condition of the building is.
Okay, well, that's Jeff and Michael, anything for Tim on the structural side?
The only question I had was, I noticed it says minimum inspection guidelines, at the top of the page, Tim. I surmise that this is a working document, that these things get modified, and I imagine there'll be even more changes to this. And from listening to you, I'm pretty sure you went beyond the minimums in some of your conversation there. I would imagine, I'm not sure why they gave minimums when you should certainly, because that concerns me that people would do the very minimum.
Well, I would equate that to the building code. The building code is the absolute minimum in which you can build a structure by. Okay, so the county establishes the minimum. That doesn't mean, as you said, doesn't mean it shouldn't, more should be done. I.e., as Craig said, do we want to look at every balcony or just want to look at a representative sampling? You go above and beyond. And I think in the past, this 40-year recertification has been more, we don't want to do it because we know we're going to find things and we don't want to pay for it. And with the tragedy in Surfside is now changes. We want to know because we want to protect ourselves. And that's been the biggest shift that we're facing.
Right. Jeff, anything?
Yeah, just a question on the post tension cabling. Could you briefly explain how that works and how that reinforces the strength of the concrete? A lot of people don't understand, that the concrete itself really has no strength until that cable is in the middle. And I don't really know they're spaced quite a few on each particular floor, right? Every 4 inches, 12 inches, and then they pull them tight.
Two runs. One direction there'll be a uniform, as they call, and that could be 3 to 5 feet spaced, and then they have banded cables, which they have 6 to 15 cables going between column lines. So and actually, in the best scenario I would call it is, it's actually like a suspension bridge in your structure, where a conventional reinforced structure is just steel reinforcements, which allows the concrete to be poured horizontally and stay standing because it doesn't have any bending resistance. That's what the steel does. When you incorporate post-tension into a design, you span the slabs with cables and you drape them up and down in the cables in the slab itself, and that acts like a suspension bridge. So it gives it the required strength for the bending of cantilever balconies or long spans between column lines.
Thanks.
I'm glad I'm a CPA is all I can say at this stage. I'll worry about paying for it. You worry about building it. That's perfect.
Hey, Craig, if I can just ask one other quick one, because I did see someone post this. I had the same question. So we're talking 40-year. Is it the same for 50-year?
After the 40-year, which is the initial, it reoccurs every 10 years afterwards.
Same
Exactly.
guidelines are used?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, too, we're giving a report card to the city so they know what the building is without them essentially going out and looking at it.
Right.
And are more engineers using drones to do some of this inspection stuff?
That has become more popular. Yes.
Tim, are pilings involved in the structural checklist?
Well,
pilings?
because pilings are underneath the floor slabs, underneath the pile caps, the access to the pile. If you can see your pile,
You got a problem?
you have an issue, right? Now, a lot of times, and I want to clarify that because I was at a building this morning. A lot of times you'll see in like an asphalt parking area, you'll see the pile cap protruding up through or it looks like it's heaving up through. That's not usually the case. Usually the case is a settlement of the asphalt parking around it has now settled around it, and the pile cap itself, you can see the outline. So that's not a completely dangerous situation at all. But the issue we have is the piles, and the analogy I've always used is like a tooth. Your tooth usually has 4 roots. Your molars have 4 roots. You can bite anything, chew anything. And for anyone that's ever gotten a tooth pulled out, a dentist can pull it out like it's not even there. And, they're totally designed to bear weight. They bear the weight of the vertical columns and they disperse it into the ground. So it's really a significant structural element. The oxidation or degradation of the pile or pile caps rarely occurs because guess what? There's no oxygen in the soil to allow the oxidation process to occur. So they stay intact. Is there other conditions like differential settlement or movement? Yes, there can be. And what would be the resulting condition? You would see cracking of the structure, the column beams, the walls that are over that column. So if you do not see any associated damage, as I would call it, you generally would not have an issue. Okay. In general. Now, there are very high-tech testing methodologies that geotechnical engineers can use to kind of verify that there are no subsurface conditions. But I would say in the context of the 40-year recertification, that would be the second phase. If you found conditions, then you may go that route.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Tim, I want to take you back a step for a second. Not every engineer can do this or is qualified. So if am I looking for a specific type of engineer that I'm hiring to do the recertification?
Well, in this particular case, you're looking for 2. For the electrical portion, electrical engineer, or an MEP engineer, which is a mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer, licensed in the state. For the recertification, you're looking for a civil structural PE with experience in design and also evaluation of buildings.
Okay, I appreciate that. And you are one. So Tim's contact information you can see at the end of this webinar for sure. And he's open for business from what he's told us, which is good. Although his dance card is filling up rapidly, I think is a fair comment. Okay, guys, let's go on to the electrical side. Marinez, will you pull up the electrical checklist? And kind of same thing, Tim, take us through what's involved, what type of testing you're doing, what we can expect as a resident in the building.
Okay, and again, let me just qualify this. I'm a structural engineer, but I have been involved with this. So, what's happening is, I was on the phone call about an hour and a half ago, and the manager said that we had their equipment. The building was 40 years old. They don't make the equipment anymore. So the equipment, there's no replacement parts and things of that nature. Aluminum wire is another huge issue for life safety, potential fire. So they want a licensed professional engineer to go in and evaluate the electrical distribution system from the panel, from the source in, because there also are FP&L vaults in buildings that provide the power source, and then that goes to their main electrical vault room, and then it distributes amongst the building. And that would also include inspection of individual units and the panels in the individual units. If the building has a certain age, also, as we all know, trying to govern individual owners from doing renovations and seeing some of the stuff that they do. We're trying to prevent any type of fire or anything like that. So it really goes down the same thing. And you can look in this, it says the electrical services, the meter rooms, the grounding. With grounding is an incredible thing. They should test the grounding. The panels, the disconnect switches, branch circuits and things of that nature, and all the way into the unit. So they really track from the power source to their panel room and throughout the building.
And does it deteriorate? Does the electrical system deteriorate?
What happens is the older ones discontinue. And here's one thing that I've seen personally is that when you leave, if they don't get, and rarely do you clean them, but with the dust and the degradation, especially concrete dust, it will eat the contacts. The copper contacts will degrade, and that's also true for salt air. So if you're close to the ocean and you don't have keep the humidity down or whatever in there, your contacts can deteriorate, and that's going to cause a premature failure.
Well, you're just full of good news today for us, Tim. Thank you.
I left my black hat over in the corner. I wore the black shirt.
So, listen, Tim, I really appreciate that, because actually, as I've researched this more and more, I really didn't understand. I thought it was structural. That was what the process was. Clearly, there's a big component, which is electrical, which is a fire hazard, right? That's a big, I
think they would classify it as one's a fire and one would be a potential collapse. Those are really where it's,
risk is.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you complete your report, you do your test, you complete your report, you submit it to the county on behalf of the association?
I personally have never walked it to the municipality. We give a signed and sealed report to the owner, manager or whatever, and then they are supposed to submit it because they were notified. As everything that we see and as my kind of checklist, I think that's going to change. I don't want to do a report and then 5 years later find out that report was sitting in a file and it never got reported. I think the fiduciary responsibility will be incorporated into this, that the professional that is hired will then also have to certify to the city directly to eliminate potentially hopscotching that particular requirement.
Or bearing a report. Like we have had some questions regarding, like, I never knew the report was done and I never knew about it. So I think it's a great point. I would also say for the board members listening out there, if you're in this process, involve your attorney. It is a dot the I, cross the T type of process to some extent to comply with the governmental side of this. So I would involve your attorney. So Tim, now they have the report. Who decides what has to get done? Because your report says these are the issues. Who decides what has to get done?
Well, I would say it would be between the engineer and the association. If we go back to the structural checklist, not all having a hairline crack doesn't mean that we have to repair it, but having significantly spalled and oxidized reinforcement to a structural element, we have to repair. So the problem, as I said earlier, is we may meet the responsibility of the minimum building inspection, structural building inspection, but that information will not allow us to go to bid once we go and formulate and say what we want to fix or what needs to be fixed. You've got to quantify it. And those that have done concrete, you have to have linear foot of certain repairs, square foot, things of that nature. So it's kind of a miss. What I would say is what you get this report done, the associations are kind of short-minded in that is that they don't have the information to go to bid, which would require the quantification of the damage to be able to write the specification and then get dollar values back from qualified bidders.
I think it's a great point, and one you made yesterday, you made earlier, which was you've kind of checked the box from a reporting standpoint, although you don't have a recertification confirmation that you're good, but you've checked the box from the process standpoint. But now the real side of the work has to happen, which is what has to get done. And the biggest question, of course, is, what is the cost? So, Jeff, I'm going to ask you, you've been involved in these processes, we've re-engaged Tim. What's next for the association?
Board needs to meet and discuss the implications of the report. Board needs to inform the owners. I think it's very smart to let the owners know what's contained in the report and what the board plans on doing with it. You want to have a very open, transparent process. You're more likely than not going to involve that same engineer that prepared the report, helping you determine which contractor to hire. So you're going to put a bid package together. When you do put the bid package together, that's your time to get the contract of choice that you want the whoever bids and gets the job to use. And we can talk more about the differences on the AIA contract in a little bit, and the contract we prefer to use. But essentially, let's get the ball rolling. It's not to kick the can down the road and let next year's board deal with that report. It's time to tee up and put a schedule together of, even if we have to amend that schedule, at least it's something to work towards. We want to have our bids out by this date. We want to have them received by this date. We want to be in contact with a lender. Many of these repairs can cost millions of dollars. There's no need for everyone to have to front $150,000 or $200,000 for these repairs. If that's, God forbid, that's the type of situation you're facing, when in fact you can really get a loan for that amount of money and string it out for 7 to 10 years. So there's lots of ways to finance these projects, but you need to involve and put your team together. And the team is going to be the engineer, the team is going to be the general contractor, the team is going to be the lender, the team is going to be the attorney. And the board members will change over the years while this is all implemented.
Right. And Michael, do I have to go to bid? Do I have to get competitive bids?
Well, yeah. So what you're talking about then is you like you had said, you re-engage the engineer, and quite frankly, that's probably the first contract you should be having your attorney look at. And then, sorry, no offense, Tim. And then with those RFPs, which are requests for proposals for those listening who might not have been familiar with the RFP term. Once you get those in and you put out the bid package, and the answer is, do we need to get bids? Well, the answer that in this situation is, unless there's a true emergency, which we're not talking about as far as this conversation goes, the answer is you're going to need to get bids in an HOA setting if the cost of the project is going to exceed 10% of your budget, including reserves. In the condo setting, and this is by statute 720 for HOA, 718 for condo, if the cost of the project exceeds 5% of your budget, including your reserves, then competitive bids are required to be sought. That said, I think we'll all agree good business practices, if you're looking at doing these construction related projects, you want to go out and solicit bids. The statutes talk in terms of bids plural, meaning at least 2. I would suggest that minimum of 3 makes the most sense, and with these larger projects, you might even get 4 or 5. And then your engineers, Jeff pointed out, you'll work with your qualified engineer in looking at those business terms and narrowing down which way you want to go before sending over the vendor choice to your attorney to then help you negotiate the legal protections and things before you move forward in signing.
Michael, that's a great point. So we've worked together as a team to select the appropriate party that we want to contract with. We are a wise association, so we're going to send the contract over to the attorney to review. Jeff, tell us about these A1A contracts. You've mentioned it. Typically, a lot of times they come in and then A1A is a standard contract. Can you give us a little bit of background and what, your thoughts are on that?
I certainly can. Before I do, if the association for some reason can only get one bid on this, maybe you need stainless steel stairs and there's only one vendor, or maybe there are many vendors, but only one will respond despite your attempts. That's going to be okay. There's an exception for that. So just be aware of that little wrinkle that's out there. Also, no obligation to take the lowest bid. A lot of people think we have to take the lowest bid. This is not government. We don't want inferior work. We want good work. So you don't have to low it. And finally, to your question, Craig, AIA contract, you ask any contractor, they'll tell you it's a fair deal. No, it isn't. Talk to your attorney. We have a construction contract that we use in-house that we've taken a lot of time to prepare that really we feel protects our clients better. First of all, the board members could actually read it and stand a much better chance of understanding it. There are terms and conditions that are imputed, if you will, into the AIA contract. Part of it's only available online to those people who have the ability to actually get to that section of the AIA contract. And when you read a sentence, it's horrible. It references you to 3 other sections and then from there to another section, and trying to make sense of it all for the layman is extremely difficult. Why not have as close as you can plain English contract, which protects the association, still gives the contractor the assurances he needs to get paid and liability and indemnity, and you work out all those issues. There isn't one time we haven't had to negotiate that contract, but it sure does set the playing field and really approaches the position from a position of strength from the association perspective. If you're not including a association prepared contract in your bid package, I think you're missing the boat as an association board, because then what you're saying to the contractor is, well, we accept your bid financially, and please give us whatever dreck of a contract that's really going to hurt us later. And that's what you're going to get if you wait that long. I'm sorry to put it that way, but we've seen this happen so many times.
Mhm.
And sometimes it happens that a contractor will see the contract that I provided. It's only happened twice. And decide they don't want the job anymore. Usually that's because we explain to our clients they want to be bonded. They should be bonded. Contractor says no problem. And then sure enough, the contractor can't get bonded. So if a contractor can't get bonded, that's a sign right there, right? A lot of good requirements coming from the bonding companies in order for them to write those insurance policies and bond those projects. It adds 3 to 5%. It's the best 3 to 5% you will spend on your construction project, because if things go south, that bond really comes in handy. And I've had to activate those bonds, and thank God they're there. In fact, I think I have a board member listening today when we had to do that a few years back.
Jeff, that's great guidance. I think including the contract you want in your bid package is a great.
It will save, it also, it'll really expedite the process. Jeff, it was really strong points you were making, and I 100% agree with all of them. You know, this contract that we've worked hard, and it's a living, breathing document. I mean, you know, things change, we modify it, we update it. Sometimes there's terms within, you know, the specs that we might get from the engineer and the board that will help us, you know, modify the actual document we want to include. But before you put the RFP out, if you have this, hey, this is what you're going to be using as the base contract, then the contractors who are bidding understand that, and that will expedite, or should expedite, the negotiation time once you have your selected vendor. And that the boards and everybody involved likes that part of the process.
Michael, that rolls nicely into the question I have for you, which is, how long do I have? I've the report's done. How long do I have to do the work?
You're talking about the 40-year inspection report?
Yeah, sorry, yes.
Yeah. And I don't know. I thought, I believe it's 90 days, Tim. Is that accurate?
Well, right now,
At least to get to notify them?
45
I'm
days.
sorry?
Putting the report in from the time it was Dade County, it said 45 days, which is impossible with the number of buildings down
Right.
there. But you turn in a reasonable period, and then generally they give you 180 days to address the issue.
180.
Of course, if it's a bigger project, they will come back to you, or they want a update within 180
Right.
days where we are and where it's going.
Right. And that's the point, Greg. I think they always have this deadline, but the importance of that deadline, and I think Tim's confirming, is you need to be able to show the municipality that you are proactively addressing those issues that are set forth in the report. You by all means should try to get it within the timeframes, but you know, 180 days is virtually impossible, especially with the volume of work that is going to be out there. You can have the proper people in place, but they may not be able to get you on the calendar for 4 to 6 months.
I think probably it's an endorsement of getting at this earlier than waiting for your 40-year letter to come from the county.
Absolutely.
Tim, when the work's done, do you come out and is there actually a formal certification that you send into the city saying the work is done?
Yes, well, we are threshold inspectors too. So we will not only manage the job and oversee it, we will act as a city, as a governmental agency, and then periodically, which is approximately every 2 weeks, send in certification packages to the city throughout the project. So they'll have our inspection reports and then a signed and sealed letter to me certifying the work was done in accordance. And then when the project is done, we sign off and then do a final certification that it was completed. On the 40-year certification program, that letter would include a statement that all the work has been completed and the building now meets the criteria for 40-year recertification.
And does the city have to do anything? Do they come out and rubber stamp it, or is that the end?
I that would vary from project to project. I'd imagine with the workload coming up, it's probably going to be hit or miss, but they want really the engineer to be their eyes and ears, really is what it's about, to hand to them. And then they have the option to come out throughout the project and at the final. And they may start, that may be one of the criteria. They may start a final inspection to walk around to make sure that there is no visible damage that they can identify when that is completed.
Okay, well, listen, I appreciate that. One last question. We're getting a bunch of questions. We're going to move on because that was great data, but I want to get to a couple of other things. Tim, I'm going to put you on the spot because tons of questions on, is this going to cost me 100 grand or 10 grand? Can you give us a guideline? And no one will hold you to these quotes, these bids that you're giving, but.
And just to let everyone know that you've already grilled me on that. We said based on 100-unit building, to complete this procedure, and I'm talking about the minimum safety inspection, you're probably looking somewhere between 7,500 and 10 grand. To perform the required work to quantify the damage, you're probably looking for another 5 grand to quantify it. And so what you can do really is when you want to do a 40-year recertification and you know that you have damage, you go ahead and pay the 50, let's say the 15 grand, and you will qualify to be able to prepare this report and turn it in. But then also too, you'll have the quantities to go forward to bid the project out.
Right.
So that's an important part here, because turning this into the city does not get you a qualified bid.
Well, listen, I appreciate that. And for those that are listening, this is a fictional 100-unit, 5-story building. So when you call Tim and it's 25 grand, don't call me to say he said.
Good point.
Good
point.
Thank you for going out on a limb. I think that's good guidance. Sorry, Jeff.
No, it's okay. I was just thinking that when you're actually that $5,000, is that including the repair protocols as well? When you're
No, that would be quantify the damage. That's, the investigation. Then you have the specifications where you sit down and say, how are we going to address this? What needs to be addressed? And again, too, as a structural engineer, I'm happy to lead the charge and tell the owner or the client what to do. That's not how I do it. We sit down because I think there's some fiduciary responsibility for the board members to understand in general what needs to happen to address and repair the building.
Okay, I'm going to cut some corners here, guys. I did want to jump into the ELSS, and I practiced that acronym all night so that I would get
well done.
Right. So Jeff, can you remind us of where we are with respect to the ELLS mandate? And then I'm going to ask you to also tell me whether it overlaps with this recertification process.
Mike, what was that?
Craig, you said it right the first time, then you fell to the ELLS.
Oh.
Right. It's the Engineered Life Safety System. A lot of people say
CPA, remember.
The Engineered Life Safety System. And essentially everyone the condominiums have until January 1st, 2024 to come in to compliance. And it's as to any high-rise condominium building as defined under the Florida Fire Prevention Code. You either have to retrofit a fire sprinkler system or have an engineered life safety system. So if the fire inspector comes out and you don't have fire sprinklers where you should have them, then you have to install them by January 1st, 2024, subject to a vote of the owners. If the owners vote they don't want to do the fire sprinklers, then you can do the engineered life safety system approach. However, what we have learned from some of our clients is that ELSS system can actually end up costing more than the installation of the fire sprinklers. And as a part of the ELSS system, they could even require some fire sprinklers in the common areas. And if anyone's wondering what a high-rise building is, generally speaking, it's defined as this. The definition must come from the Florida Fire Prevention Code. It's a high-rise building means a building where the floor of an occupiable story is greater than 75 feet above the lowest level of the fire department vehicle access. So it's not 75 feet from grade. It's where can the fire truck get to? And it's the lowest point of where the fire truck can get to, and it's 75 feet up from that point. And then you're in this. So you have until January 1st, 2024. There's an interesting part of this system. It's really fascinating that I hadn't focused in on before. It says that in the legislation, a residential association may not be obligated and may forego retrofitting any improvements required by section 553-5092. So I thought it would be fun to take a look and see what 553-5092 is. because with an affirmative vote of the voting interest in the condo, they can waive out of it. And this is where, if in your report you are being required you're being required to minimally comply with ADA standards for accessible design. So ADA standards for accessible design, if somehow that is coming into your ELSS plan as things you must do, then a secondary vote can be taken by the membership to waive out of that particular provision. It's never come up before in over 20 years of practice, but I just thought it was a fascinating subpart in 718.112, which is where you will find all of this about the fire safety, the ELSS, the fire sprinklers.
But they're basically separate systems. Tim, you're not looking at that in your recertification protocol, but it is a requirement of the statute unless it's otherwise dealt with. Is that a fair summary?
Like I know Pompano Beach requires, they've taken a step up and saying if you're going to do it, you have to have a management company run the project. So we have project management element into that, because quite frankly, you're going into units, and the management company of the building may not have enough personnel to run that, and just so they were requiring that. I put a couple bids in to run those projects.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to steal a couple of minutes because I did want to get to two more things. One, Tim, for you, the structural and the electrical component of the certification process is good, but if you're going to engage an engineer, number one, if I'm in a building, when should I engage my engineer and how often should they come back? That's question number one. And question number two, what else are you going to look at? What else should we be looking at as a prudent board with respect to systems and building structure and all those types of things?
Well, it's an old adage, the earlier the better. You hire an engineer, qualified engineer, he will evaluate your building, and he's qualified to evaluate. One thing you may want to look at, like seawall, you're on the intercoastal, that your building is relatively close, your pool structure is close to the building, to the intercoastal, and that seawall is important. That's all part of the structure, the foundation of the building. That's a perfect example. There's not too much elevation difference, but if you have swales around your building and the swales can settle out and may uncover your foundation, those are things that may affect your foundation aspect from that. But absolutely, the engineer is an important part, and I'm not just trying to say that because we can help. And if there is no problem, hopefully your engineer will say, look, we have no problem, this building's been maintained, we don't have to go from there. But at least it's the person that will start the process to evaluate your building.
I think it's a great point. And what we're hearing from our residents is lots of worry in the community. So having your engineer come out will at least give you some peace of mind in terms of how your building is faring. Okay, Tim, thank you very much. Michael, I'm going to ask you to speculate on what we think might happen. But before I get that, there are a number of questions on how we can fund this type of thing. Michael has a webinar August 5th with our team, 12 to 1, to specifically address how major projects can be funded. Michael, look out for, I would say to the listeners, there's lots of questions. Look out for that invitation. Jump on with Michael. He's got lots of good guidance for associations. Michael, can you give us a couple of highlights maybe?
Yeah, well, yeah, again, yeah, it is the title of it is funding construction projects. For you managers, there is a one credit CEU course involved. Board members, obviously excellent class. And what we'll talk about there is the different methods of funding construction, which will include budgeting, both operating and reserves, special assessment and process and procedures, and the big one would be the financing of it through loan or line of credit. And it talks about, and we'll be talking about the do's and don'ts and the ways to do these processes to ensure seamlessness and streamlining, and not get snagged on pitfalls that I continually have seen occur in reviewing these projects and loan into particular financing options. So those are really so I encourage everybody who's got any projects that you're going to be working on, big or small, to come August 5th, Thursday, August 5th, noon to 1, be doing this program with our friends here at Castle, and it'll be great. So that's it.
Michael, very timely. I'm going to ask you one more thing. I wanted you to, we're already searching into or I guess reaching into 2022 legislative session, my guess is the topic of maintenance and engineering inspections and stuff is a hot topic. Are you hearing anything?
We are, of course. There's already, there are, Senator Pizza, who is out of Miami, and out there, he's already, he's been, I think, publicly out there talking about the need for us to be addressing these things in Tallahassee. FLA, by the way, Florida Legislative Alliance. That's who it is. We actually had a workshop ourselves to talk about what's going on there, and there's no question there's going to be discussion. There's going to be reactions to the Surfside tragedy. What I think it's going to have to be tempered by is to ensure there's not overreactions.
Right.
That said, there's certainly going to be discussions pertaining or surrounding requirement for periodic inspections, the question of reserves, the idea, especially in the condominium setting, the statutes do allow the membership to vote to waive reserves if the board wants to present the question. And that is certainly a topic that's going to be discussed and ad nauseum. And ultimately, I'm sure we'll have discussions on it, in our next program, which I believe is October.
Well, Michael, I appreciate that. I want to thank you guys, Jeff and Tim and Michael. Thank you again. Great information today. I would want to leave our webinar participants with do what's right. The whole process of inspecting your building is what's right for your community. It may not be required, but it's certainly the right thing to do. So I would follow your instincts in that regard. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Participants, thank you for listening in. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. I guess we'll see you in a month. But Michael, I'll listen to your webinar on the 5th. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. Be well.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye now.